Hello, content literacy students. I'm here today to provide a presentation about text complexity. And the purposes of this presentation are to introduce to you how and why you'll be using text complexity within your unit, deepen your understanding of text complexity with an example text, and demonstrate some tools that you'll use to complete the text complexity sections within your text set annotations for your unit, and the discussion board post for this module. Okay, so first I want to, actually I'm going to back up a little bit. First I want to make sure that you have some resources that we'll be using in this video. I'm in online work for module 2. Scrolling down here. These two rubrics, the informational text complexity qualitative measures, SCAS rubric, and the one for literary text as well. You may want to print them. We're especially going to look at the literary one and both of these rubrics more in class, but it might be helpful for you to have them for this video. And this reading level correlation chart. Okay, so this is what those three things look like. This is the informational text complexity qualitative measures rubric. This is the one for literary texts, and then the reading level correlation chart. Okay? Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just briefly review the way that we think about and the ways that we determine text complexity. So the three portions, and this originally came from the Common Core Learning Standards. It's the same model is being used in many other contexts as well. But the qualitative being looking at levels of meaning, the purpose for a text, the structures or structure of the text, the language conventionality, meaning like, is it written in dialogue or dialect, I'm sorry. And let's say Shakespearean English versus present day English writing, the clarity of the writing and of the message of the text, and the knowledge demands of that text. And so when we're thinking about the qualitative factors of text complexity, various people have come up with rubrics that can be used to determine those qualitative portions, okay? And so you can see text structure, language features, purpose, and knowledge demands. I've tried out a couple different rubrics. This one seems to be the most useful and accurate. And again, we have a different rubric for informational text versus literary text, okay? So that's just talking about the qualitative portion of text complexity. Then we also have this quantitative portion. And this has been around for a long time. Usually we've used the term readability, and you might have heard of like Fry's readability measures. You can actually type things into Word, and Microsoft Word has in it a readability calculator. And so the formulas that are used to determine the readability of a text, which most often was expressed as grade level equivalent, which you can see on our reading level correlation chart. So for example, if the grade level equivalent, the GLE, is listed as 3.7, it means third grade, 7th month. Okay, that's the readability, the difficulty level of that text. Since Common Core, we've been using mostly Lexile numbers to determine or to state the readability of a text. All right, I'm going to show you some things about Lexile in just a minute. The most important thing to remember about the quantitative measure of text complexity is that it's about what's calculated with a computer. Okay, there is not a human involved in calculating the readability of a text or the Lexile level of a text. The text itself, the words itself, themselves are put through a computer program that analyzes the word length, the frequency, or like how many times the same word or words are repeated in a particular text, um, the sentence length and the text cohesion, which has a lot to do with like grammar, but from a computer standpoint. Okay. So those are the two portions that most people seem to know the most about. And then you also have read an article that really focused on the reader and task considerations, really thinking about is the teacher asking the student to do with that text and what support is provided. And so it's all three of these factors. It's really important to remember this. It's all three of these factors that really need to be taken into consideration when we think about the text complexity and what we do with students in various texts. Okay? So I want to, now that we've reviewed that a little bit, I want to explain to you what you're going to be doing with this information or this knowledge that you're gaining. So I have started to build a model of a text set, a multi-literacies text set, similar to what you're going to make for your unit. So the theme of my unit is Roots and Branches of Conflict. And as you might recall from my sharing of my themed unit overview, my standard focuses on, or has in part of it, the Vietnam War. And so you can see I've collected a variety of different texts, and I'll go over this more later when we get into the text set, but it has a variety of texts that touch on my theme and that particular standard. So as part of your entries, okay, here are a couple of completed entries. I'm still working on these ones. You will be looking at complexity, all right? And some of your entries will be able to talk about the actual lexile level or list the actual lexile level of a text. But for example, a photograph, okay, is not going to have like a lexile level. Now, can you still and should you still talk about complexity? Definitely. Okay, and so I'm going to try and help you understand how to do that today. So just to start with the end in mind here, here is my little write-up about the complexity of this text, Patrol, by Walter Dean Myers. And I will show you this text in class as well. This is just a little intro. And so I have the lexile level listed here. And this little paragraph, it's like 2 sentences, okay, is about what I'm expecting you to do using the knowledge that you gain from the resources that you've read this week. So although the writing of this text is not difficult, the themes are most appropriate for 7th grade or older students. In addition, the text requires that readers have background knowledge about the Vietnam War to make inferences within the text. So I have 2 sentences plus this lexile level to explain to others looking at my entry what they should be thinking about in terms of this book for their students, or what they might use this book to do, or what they might, excuse me, what they might have to support students with when using this text with students, depending on their grade level, okay? Notice here I say I recommend using this text for an interactive read aloud where the teacher can pause for modeling of inferences and discuss the content of the text with students. My instructional uses are directly tied to the complexity of this text. It requires a lot of background knowledge, so therefore not just giving it to students to read on their own, but to actually direct their attention to certain things, fill in some of the background knowledge that they need, have discussion because the content's kind of heavy. These 2 things are directly related, okay? This is kind of the part where we take into consideration reader and task of that 3-part model, which was there, okay? Okay, so now what I want to do is help you understand how do we get to these different pieces. So I showed you the end goal of how you're going to be using text complexity. And although I'm talking about this goal in terms of this particular assignment, this is what we do as teachers. So anytime we're picking text for a lesson, we need to be thinking about these various aspects of the complexity of it. Okay, we need to be thinking about, yes, the readability, depending on what we want the students to do with it. And we may have a chart like this to help us. We may be pulling that text actually from a curriculum that's like, oh, use these texts, levels. This is guided reading, by the way, Fountas and Pinnell. Use these texts at levels N and O with your third grade student. But it's more complicated than that. And that's what these various rubrics help us to understand, okay, is what is more complicated about it? What makes it more complicated? But also, what do we do with that? Okay, so as a teacher, you're constantly looking at all of these different factors to figure out what texts are appropriate to with your students, and then what kinds of levels of support might you need to give students when you're working with those various texts, whether that be in literacy instruction or integrated literacy instruction with social studies or science, or as a content teacher in your social studies courses, in your science courses, etc. And even in your English courses, Shakespeare, the readability of Shakespeare is pretty challenging. And that's just in terms of the readability, just the quantitative aspects. But when you think about the qualitative aspects, the text structure of a lot of Shakespeare's writing, the language features that are used, the knowledge demands, there's a lot going on there that make it so that we have to think carefully about the levels of support that we give and the kinds of support that we give to students. Okay, so all of that is to say that it's not a perfect formula, and that our teacher judgment and increasing our knowledge about these things helps us to have better teacher judgment about what kinds of texts we choose for our students, and then what we do with them. Okay, so now what I want to do is share some of the tools that are used to get at these other parts, especially the readability. Okay, so one of the things that you'll find I've linked now in the module 2, okay, is the Lexile website, where you actually look up a book. The Lexile website has multiple parts, so this is the part that's specifically for looking up titles of books. Not every single book in the world is on there, but many, many, many books are. And then this is a website, or part of their website, that's specifically about the codes, Lexile codes. And anytime you see letters before the number, it's a code for something. All right. The L after, see 580L, that just means Lexile. And this website that I've linked here, it will explain what those codes mean. Okay. All right, so there's two main websites, the Lexile one and Scholastic Book Wizard, that you can use to help you get at the readability of a text. So let me show you those. Okay, so this is the Lexile, the part of the Lexile website where you can find a book. Okay, and put in a title, and it spits back, let's say, Harry Potter Chamber of Secrets. Oops, not secrety, secrets. And when we do that, when we put that in there, it gives us the Lexile. It also usually gives a little summary and some other things about the book. Some of these things are good, and a lot of them are kind of like the Lexile Power V word selector identifies up to 10 challenging words in each book. I don't know. It's okay. It's kind of markety, but anyway. But this provides for us this Lexile measure, okay, which is basically an annotation of readability. And then we can use that with our correlation chart. So 940L, if we look at this, 940 is it's in the 6th grade. All right. Now, they have bands, and this is according to the Common Core Learning Standard Expectations as of 2012. They amended it a couple of times, but this is within the 6th grade level, according to Lexile only. Okay, so remember, that's not taking into consideration qualitative factors, that's just quantitative. All right? Okay, so that's basically how it works. So let me go back to, I have too many windows open here. Let me go back to my entry here on patrol. Okay, so when I look up the Lexile level for patrol, this is what comes up. Now, I'm going to read to you the little summary because it's important for understanding why we have to use all three aspects of text complexity to determine that. So, Vietnam, a young American soldier waits for his enemy, rifle in hand, finger on the trigger. He is afraid to move, and yet afraid not to move. Gunshots crackle in the still air. The soldier fires blindly into the distant trees at an unseen enemy. He crouches and waits, heart pounding, tense and trembling. Biting back tears. When will it all be over? Walter Dean Myers joined the Army on his 17th birthday. So there should be, in my opinion, a different paragraph here. But Walter Dean Myers joined the Army on his 17th birthday at the onset of the American involvement in Vietnam. But it was the death of his brother in 1968 that forever changed his mind about war. In a gripping and powerful story poem, the award-winning author takes readers into the heart and mind of a young soldier in an alien land who comes face to face with the enemy. Strikingly illustrated with evocative and emotionally wrenching collages by Caldecott honor artist Anne Griffel-Coney, this unforgettable portrait captures one American GI's haunting experience. Okay. So I'm not going to get into these other parts down here. They're starting to try to provide other ways for teachers or parents, whoever's looking at Lexile levels, to understand what they mean. And so they've kind of included some of these other indicators. The most important thing you're going to be using is the Lexile measure. So we have this Lexile measure of 560. So when we look on the correlation chart and we look for 560, this is in the grade 2, second grade readability. Now, you should be thinking, would I read this with second graders? Why or why not? Okay, what would make this appropriate or not appropriate for second graders, even though they could likely, the average second grader could likely read the words in the book, okay? So that's when we have to look into, obviously, the qualitative aspects of it. What's the background knowledge that's needed? What are the language structures? What is the context of the meaning of the book? Okay, and these different very very specific criteria can help us understand if, even though it has a Lexile level of 560, if it's coming out as exceedingly complex when we look at these things, then it probably means that we need to use that book with readers that are a little bit more advanced, okay? That they can handle some of these other aspects of text complexity. With this particular book, looking at knowledge demands, their life experiences as 7 and 8-year-olds probably would indicate that it might be difficult for them to really grasp that text. In class, we're going to be digging into these rubrics a little bit more. You're actually going to be trying them out, okay, with a couple of different texts. So I'm not going to go into the intricacies of this rubric now. My main point here is for us to think about and carefully understand why, the purpose that we have these kinds of rubrics, and that we look at text complexity with all three of those different measures. Okay, so I showed to you the Lexile website and how that works. The other website I wanted to show you is Scholastic Book Wizard. Okay, and this too, you just type in a title. We can do that again. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And it will provide for us some indicators that of readability and of the complexity of this text. Now, unlike Lexile, this can give us some other measures as well. Okay, when they say guided reading here, they're using Fountas and Pinnell's model of determining text complexity, or determining the level of the difficulty of a text, and that's where they come up with V. Okay, notice they give these two different grade spans. A little vague, but okay. It probably depends on how the students are interacting with the text. Is the teacher reading it aloud to them versus the student reading it on their own? They don't really give you a lot of background about why they do this, but this is what they give you as some ranges. And when we think about guided reading level V, That's expected to be happening towards the end of grade 5. Okay. When we looked at the Lexile level, remember that it was within grade 6 for this same text. Now, something that is interesting and a little disturbing to me is sometimes they don't have the same Lexile level as the Lexile website does. Now, this time they do, 940, okay? But I also have it where it didn't, and I'll show you that in just a second. They also have grade level equivalent. Sometimes it's not listed, okay? But again, that's where this correlation chart can be really helpful. Level V, that's about a 5.9, 5th grade, 9th month, okay? And they also have, and you don't need to worry about this too much, but DRA, some of the school districts that you may work in or schools you may work in may use the DRA, which is the Developmental Reading Assessment, as their leveled kind of benchmark assessment. And so that's what these levels are. Okay, you also see teachers, college, reading and writing. These are the levels that they go off of. All right, we also have reading A to Z. Confusing because it is A to Z, but it's not the same as Fountas and Pinnell guided reading. Notice that, you know, what their spans for grade 4 and that align with those Lexiles for grade 4 are not the same as Fountas and Pinnell's. So here for grade 4, let's say we start at PQ, we go to ST, they start at TU and go to W for reading A to Z. And then we also have reading recovery, which is more used like basically in the primary grades, especially reading recovery is an intervention that's mostly focused on 1st grade. Okay. All right. So what I wanted to show you, little side note, Scholastic Book Wizard does have an app. I've heard mixed reviews from teachers. I don't have it myself, but some teachers absolutely love it and they use it all the time and they scan books and the level can come up right away. And some teachers say it seems kind of off, but anyway, or it's kind of glitchy. So we looked up the Lexile level, remember, for Patrol, 560. I looked up the same book in Scholastic Book Wizard. Notice that they give these grade spans, 3rd to 8th grade. That's pretty wide. They have a guided reading M. Let's take a look at our correlation chart. Guided reading level M is towards the end of 2nd grade. All right, so kind of similar to the Lexile. But when you look at their Lexile measure, they say 280L. Okay, so the Lexile measure of 280, which is in the 1st grade span. So I don't know why they have the Lexile measure as 280 when you go on Lexile it says 560. I don't understand what's happening there, but the inconsistency makes me a little anxious about Scholastic Book Wizard. So when you really need to know the Lexile level, go to the Lexile's actual website, okay? And then they also have, do they have grade level equivalent? No, they didn't for that one. And they do have DRA level, okay? A couple of things to note about these various different leveling systems. A guided reading level is usually created by humans. Okay, so Fountas and Pinnell were the ones that they explain their methods or whatever for text for leveling a book, and they're very specific, of course, because they're super detail-oriented women. But they go into a lot of specifics about how to make a level for a particular book. And so when a book, especially if the book is leveled by them, meaning, hang on just a minute, on their website, fountasandpinnelllevelbooks.com, although I believe that they have the greatest validity in their leveling because they do take into consideration both readability and qualitative factors, quantitative and qualitative, they charge. And I'm just not willing to pay because I don't use it enough to warrant that. But I trust their levels most because they're the most robust. They take the most consideration of all different factors when they provide a particular guided reading level for a book. So these other two, Lexile is, as I said, purely quantitative. Scholastic Book Wizard, I'm not sure where they're pulling their levels from. I like to use Scholastic Book Wizard because I feel like it's better than just simply a Lexile level, because it does give some of these other ones that I can kind of compare it to. But none of them is truly reliable, honestly, totally on its own, because they don't know your kids and they don't know your context. They don't know your kids' background knowledge and their life experiences and whatnot. So the teacher is the best way to do this. You just have to have the knowledge to be able to make those kinds of decisions, okay, about the difficulty of a text. Okay, so I showed you the tools. I gave you a couple examples to help you understand. In our seated class session, we will be doing an activity with peers in which you're using the resources that I provided, the rubrics, and I'll have hard copies of the rubrics for you, and the websites, so that you can exercise some of these skills, talk with others about them. We'll have some folks working with literary texts, some folks working with informational texts, and then we'll share our analyses with one another, and also take a shot at drafting a little paragraph, okay, together, so that you have some practice before you start creating your text set. All right. So thank you all for your rapt attention, and I look forward to seeing you soon.